Pete, it's Lynn Siegel, the Legal Eagle's wife. You can post this publicly if you so choose. I don't know if I'll make the cut, but I will hope that I will. Anyway, I am leaving you a message to say congratulations on 500 episodes of your podcast.
Stand up.
Hello and welcome to the New Year's Eve special episode of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. And by special, I mean it's a totally normal episode, like no different than any other Friday episode, in that I've got Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg, but also third guest, David Daly. I mean, Christian and Ophira and I join pretty much every Friday. We have a three-way, hilarious, thoughtful, thought-provoking conversation. But today, also, I have author, former editor of Salon.com, David Daley, joining me as well. Really great conversation with him. Awesome conversation with Christian and Ophira. I think you're really going to like the Friday show. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning into the New Year's Eve extravaganza, totally normal Friday program here. Episode 509 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic, and that's me. Great to hang out with so many of over 50 of you hanging out on Thursday night with me. We had a hilarious, fun time. I mean, there were a lot of laughs at the hangout last night, and actually just wrapped. I'm acting like it's last night because I always do, but it's late. It's just past midnight, and I'll tell you what, McDonald's closes 10 minutes earlier than they say they do. Is a friend of mine told me. I would never do a late night McDonald's run at this point in my life, but a friend of mine told me that when he went to pick up his daughter after the hangout, and I was like, dude, you're a monster. That's disgusting. And so that must have been frustrating for that guy. Anyway, folks, two great guests, an amazing week. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't already, go to standupwithpete.com right now or patreon.com/Pete Dominic and support the show with a paid subscription. And don't forget, this is the final day to get it on at least the 2021 taxes to give a charitable donation to GiveWell. GiveWell.org/standup. This is your opportunity. I've been plugging it almost every day this month. Check it out right now. This is the best nonprofit that you can donate to. Make your dollar go the furthest to save lives and end suffering. Go now. GiveWell.org/standup. If you haven't, please do it and let me know that you did, and that would make my day. All right, let's get to my first guest. And coming up, Christian and Ophira for Finnegan. Always a pleasure having them. We had a great conversation. But first, it's the author of Ratfuck, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, and Unrigged, How Americans Battled Back to Save Democracy. He's the former editor-in-chief of Salon.com. Really happy to have Dave Daley back on the show. Dave Daley 3 on Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started right now. All right, this is my go-to, David Daley, to talk about all of these things and where we're at the end of 2021 as we head into 2022. How does the electoral map look and rigged? And he's the best guy to go to, in my opinion. Sir, happy holidays, and thank you for joining me. And I did ask you this before, but everybody does have to answer. I call it Taint Week, by the way, this week. This week between
Taint Christmas, Taint New Year's.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a sound philosophy, which I firmly support, on personally what you think folks should do or what you'd like to do during this weird week.
Oh, I think you should be doing nothing but finishing up the Christmas cookies in your house. You should be polishing off any unfinished bottles of anything that you may have opened over that period of time, because a new year really means a new liquor cabinet. And especially as we head into 2022.
Oh, I like that. I like that idea a lot. And folks, my liquor cabinet is getting pretty empty. If you'd like my address, people, I can't tell you how many listeners have sent me whiskey. It's fantastic. Okay.
You have good listeners.
I really do. Thoughtful, classy listeners, except for that guy who sent me Evan Williams, but he was on a real strict budget and I appreciated the thought.
He was trying.
And by that guy, I meant me when I first lost my job. Okay, so let's take a look at where we're at and what the strategy is. But it would seem, generally speaking, the Republicans and individual states and at the national level are trying to do what with voting? I mean, what is the strategy that they have laid out and that they are, in my opinion, have done very, very well with? I know you could fill an hour up kind of talking about that strategy. I know it's a lot, but generally speaking, in case people haven't really thought about it, what are they trying to do in 2022 with redistricting and all the rest?
Republicans are trying to rule from the minority, effectively, is what they're trying to do. And the structures of American politics allow them to get away with this. And so what they've really done is they've leaned into this. They lean into it in state legislatures in the U.S. House through gerrymandering. They lean into the structural advantages that the rural states and small states, the whiter states, have in the U.S. Senate that allow them to control that body, even though they lose the popular vote there by tens of millions of votes. You've got 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans right now, but the 50 Democrats represent 41.7 million more people. The advantage that they have in the U.S. Senate also translates into an advantage in the Electoral College. So while Democrats have won 7 of the last 8 presidential election popular votes, Republicans have still managed to win the White House in 2000 and in 2016. And presidents who won without the popular vote have been able to confirm 5 of the 6 conservative justices on the U.S. Supreme Court with the help of that structurally imbalanced U.S. Senate. So Republicans have all of these advantages on one side, and now they're just continuing to use and refine them. They're able to use the filibuster in the Senate to effectively block a Democratic trifecta in Washington from achieving popular aims, whether that is spending bills, whether it's voting rights. And then they are able to use their gerrymandered advantages in state legislatures to make it even more difficult to vote. And in these states like Arizona or Georgia, states where 10, 11, 12,000 votes can tip the balance at the presidential level, as we saw in 2020, the kinds of bills that they are drawing, the kind of maps that they are entrenching themselves in power with for the next decade at that level, it's going to be a good time to strengthen that liquor cabinet in 2022. Because things are not going to get better for our democracy anytime in the short term.
You're so sure of that?
I am reasonably confident of that. Yes. I mean, as I look at what is happening, what I see is a Republican Party that has effectively broken faith with democracy, that is very comfortable ruling from the minority. What I see are states around the nation, whether Wisconsin or North Carolina, that haven't effectively been democracies for the last decade because of Republican gerrymandering. And you have these, you've got a U.S. Supreme Court that in the Shelby County case in 2013 effectively declared racism and racially prejudiced voting to be a thing of the past. It was over. And so they gave all of these gerrymandered state legislatures the ability to enact all kinds of voting laws in states that had been covered by preclearance. Texas that very afternoon enacts a new voter ID bill that, studies show required the very ID that 600,000 Latino residents in Texas didn't have, even though they were citizens, registered voters. They simply lacked the ID that this new bill required. Racism was so over in the South that it took all of 6 hours for Greg Abbott and his crew to enact this law back in June 2013. And when you look at what happened on January 6th, when you look at how close we came to, I don't care what you want to call it. Do you want to call it a coup? Do you want to call it a refusal to peacefully transfer power?
Overthrow the will of the people in the election. I mean, so let me ask you about that, because I had an argument with a friend for like 2 hours the other day. It was really stupid and ugly because we were talking over each other. There's a guy I've known forever, a comedian, and he wouldn't let me record it, unfortunately, because I really wanted to record it. But he's Republican, conservative, doesn't like Trump. when it comes to voting, he says, why can't you just compromise, allow there to be these security measures put in place to mitigate the argument that conservatives have that our elections have issues and security? And what I said was, even if I conceded the argument, even if I gave you all of your election security laws that you wanted, all of your changes that you wanted, none of it would matter, because the point is, if you lost, given all of those new laws passed, you would say you didn't lose. It's not a matter of, it's all a red herring. It's all a smokescreen. All of these new rules and laws, they make it harder to vote. But the point is, even if they didn't make those changes, they would just still say they didn't lose. And I felt like that was so frustrating, because that's where I was settled. Am I right? Do you think that's a hypothetical argument, obviously, but it does seem that's what just happened.
I think you're right. I mean, listen, there's no proof of any of this voter fraud. So I love that the crowd in American politics whose slogan is "fuck your feelings," they have a feeling that something is not safe about elections, but they can't prove it. Well, you know what I say? I say, fuck your feelings, because you can't prove any of this. They have been doing vote by mail on the West Coast in states like Oregon and Washington, Utah. 5
states exclusively vote by mail. I think Hawaii. I've just been reading about this, so it's on the top of my mind.
They've been doing it for decades in Colorado. They've been doing it for decades in Oregon and Washington. They have statistics. They've got hundreds of millions of votes that have been cast, and they can tell you whether or not there's been any voter fraud. And they flag a handful of votes in every election, and some of them turn out to be perfectly lawfully cast, and some of them are people who are trying to vote at their summer address and their home address or their college address and their parents' address, and they get a stern talking to, and they're told not to do it again. The system catches these people. These votes are not counted. The laws that we have on the books work. It's pretty similar to what Republicans say about gun control, right? That they're like, enforce the existing laws.
Yeah.
Well, the existing laws, when it comes to voting, they catch the instances of people attempting to do this, which is already incredibly, incredibly rare. And so the idea that we need all of these laws to secure elections that are already secure is a red herring, because we know that the actual impact of the security arrangements that they want to add disproportionately affect Democratic constituencies and communities of color. And so it's impossible to accept what they say at face value.
It is impossible to accept. And they I've tried to argue with this guy. I said, my argument is always, show me the proof of where any kind of voter fraud or irregularity or crime was committed and it affected the outcome of an election anywhere, local, state, federal. Show me that election. That's where I always start in the argument and the debate on this, to the point that not needed, as you're saying. This guy kept talking about dead people. And my answer, Dave, I haven't looked into this. I'm going to look deeper into it. But my answer to that was, dead people don't vote. They don't vote because they're dead. They might still be on the rolls for whatever mistake, reason, and maybe we can fix that, but they're not voting. No, people are voting in their place as them and doubling the vote, but they're not, because they don't want to, because if they get caught, it's really bad. It happens, and it's done by really dumb people, and they seem to get caught, but it really doesn't happen that much. Without looking into it, just using what I think is common sense, the idea that people don't want to commit crimes where there's no payoff. What about the dead people?
First, you get caught. Second, it's a horribly inefficient and ineffective way to swing the balance of an election. And third, when it has happened lately, it's been Republicans doing it. If you look at the North Carolina 9th congressional race, in which they had someone going door to door trying to collect absentee ballots, this was a Republican operative. They had to rerun that election because of what they were doing.
That's right.
But, what that shows first is who's doing it. But second, how hard it is to get away with it. If you're trying to run an absentee ballot scheme and you're going around collecting signatures and ballots from people, they're going to tell folks about it. You're going to get caught and you're going to get arrested. It's not going to work.
This week, Rand Paul tweeted about a way that people vote, how either side, anybody can get out the vote, and claimed that it was a crime. Amongst others, you reacted to. I can't find the damn tweet. Here it is. No, that's not it. But saying that this is not a crime. This is completely legal. This is, everybody can do this and should do this. But that's how confusing it has gotten, and how obfuscated is certainly the right. They say that, something's a crime, which is actually promoting democracy. And I wish I could have set that up more with the tweet and reaction. What do you recall? What
Rand
he was?
Paul was out there saying that Democrats are going to register voters, and then they're going to work to have those voters cast ballots, and then they're going to make it really easy for them to return those ballots. And this is why America is no longer America. And what he's describing is voting. What he's describing is a campaign, a get out the vote effort that parties do because they want to win elections. I mean, we really need a civics test for U.S. senators.
Yeah, well, the way they can describe, normal, totally legal things as crimes, harvest balloting, ballot harvesting. There it is. I finally found it. His tweet was seeding an area with potential Democratic votes with as many absentee ballots as possible, targeting and convincing potential voters to complete them in a legally valid way, and then harvesting and counting the results. You actually did. Your paraphrase was so much better. Targeting
and convincing voters. That just sounds toxic. I mean, if ever we were to try to convince and persuade people to get involved in elections and vote, you're right. That actually might be bad for Rand Paul. So I understand why he's against it now.
Yeah. Sending people ballots to vote upon. So there have been situations in both recently Michigan and Arizona, and you wrote about what happened in Arizona for Salon, which is a really important story that, again, you cover as well, if not better than anybody, and it doesn't, gets undercovered by a lot of media, but it's so important. What's been the strategy in Arizona? Why do we need to care about this? And I'll link to David's story in today's show links.
Thank you. Arizona is one of many states around the country that uses an independent commission to redistrict. And what I think we have to be really careful about when it comes to commissions is understanding that, like any political reform, once politicians kind of figure out the way around that reform or how to pressure it, they do so. And so people describe what happens in Arizona as being an independent process. And if you look at all of the studies that that represent us and others, that did a map of which states are most at risk of gerrymandering, and they say, no problem in Arizona, they've got a commission. When in reality, Republicans have hijacked and captured that commission, and they spent 7 years working on it. And it was such a methodical process of trying to stack that board. First, it's a crazy convoluted story, but it requires stacking something called the Commission on Appellate Court Appointments first, which Doug Ducey started to do in 2015 when he was elected governor. He simply stopped putting anyone who was a Democrat on the board. And that is the commission that chooses the independent chair. And on a commission with 5 members, 2 appointed Democrats, 2 appointed Republicans, the independent chair is really all that matters. So they were able to effectively determine who the finalists would be. And all of the finalists were essentially either longtime Republicans who had recently changed their affiliation, or they were big Republican donors, or they had all these connections and ties to the administration. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the maps that were just finished in Arizona are going to lean Republican. It's entirely possible that Arizona's congressional map could be a 7-2 Republican or a 6-3 Republican map in any given year. It's currently a 5-4 Democratic map, and it's gone back and forth in that way. So Republicans are going to pick up potentially as many congressional seats in the state of Arizona as they will gerrymander themselves in the state of Texas. And nobody is looking at states like this. And of course, they're also able to gerrymander their state legislature as well, where Democrats made huge gains over the course of the last decade. Arizona is not only razor thin on the presidential level, its state Senate is 16-14, and its state House is 31-29. So it's one seat. And Democrats spent a decade kind of riding the demographic waves there and making gains. And the starting line has been, the finish line has been extended a few miles as a result of these maps. And we know the kind of laws that Arizona's state legislature has been willing to enact. This is the home of the fraudit. This is the home of a state legislature who, after the 2020 election, said, it shouldn't matter what the citizens of the state want to do with the popular vote for president. The state legislature ought to determine the electors.
Yeah, that was just one of the most outrageous things. I just want to stop you there just to put a fine point on that. That's right. It happened in Arizona, where they looked at the votes and said, it doesn't matter what the outcome of the vote is. We will decide the outcome of the vote, which is one of those things where you just want to walk up to anybody, no matter what their moral compass says. A bunch of people vote on a thing, and then you turn the thing in, and then the guy you turn it into says, I don't need this. Like, it's just a guide. Like, how what kind of person is okay with that? I don't know. When did we get there? Who are these people that are somehow all right with overturning the will of the people in your community and how they voted?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot more of this. I mean, this is what I think we need to be really nervous about as we head towards 2024. This is the logical endgame of what Republicans are doing in state legislatures. It's the logical endgame of what they're doing, trying to take over local election boards and certification processes and stacking those boards with loyalists. It's why the Secretary of State races in places like Georgia and Arizona and Michigan are going to matter so intently as we head there. And it's what you and your friend argued about. It's why that matters too, because that's what they're going to play on. They're going to play on this idea in 2024, if the race is close, that we just don't know what happened. Some of these states, it's just too close to call. We don't know. And so we're going to turn it over to the elected bodies, and we're just going to allow them to determine electors. And the Constitution could be okay with that, but, it's going to be interpreted by John Roberts and his wrecking crew, right, that has been willing to endorse something called the state legislative doctrine when it comes to election law. This is why, on January 6th of 2021, you had people dressed up in MAGA caps and Confederate gear and, all of their crazy insurrection cosplay outfits marauding around the Capitol. The folks who do this between December 13th and January 6th, 2024 and 2025 are going to be wearing three-piece suits and judicial robes, and they will have degrees from the finest law schools in America. And democracy, it will not die in darkness. It will die in plain sight.
Do you think that people should donate to an organization like Mark Elias's Democracy Docket or another?
Sure. I think Democrats are bad at spending their money in the right place, right? I mean, so we give $100 million to Amy McGrath in a kamikaze mission against Mitch McConnell that's never going to go anywhere, or a lot of money squandered to trying to beat a Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, a race that people get excited about, but which probably isn't going to happen. And then you've got these state legislatures like Arizona that are, 16-14, or where one seat flips the outcome. I mean, the Texas legislature effectively stayed Republican by about 11,000 votes. And then they go off and they enact these abortion bans and reproductive rights assaults.
Yeah.
And while we are spending $100 million trying to get Amy McGrath over the 42% mark in Kentucky. So, yes, I mean, I think that people ought to be thinking about where they donate. They ought to be looking at this just as strategically as Republicans have for decades.
What about what happened in Michigan? You seem to be celebrating this kind of organizing activism in Michigan. And I just, by the way, had state senator from Michigan who was so impressive. Senator Mallory McMorrow is her name. Point is, a lot of really effective state legislators at the state level, she being one of them. What happened in Michigan, though?
What I think the flip side of the story I told in Arizona, where the commission is not working. In Michigan, voters got together and they structured an independent commission in a way that it could actually truly be independent and outside of the political process and staffed by regular people, smart, committed people determined to a transparent and public process and a nonpartisan outcome. Michigan has been one of the most gerrymandered states in the nation for a decade, not only at the congressional level, where in 2012, for example, the congressional map was 9-5 Republican even after Obama wins the state, and Democratic U.S. House candidates won Democratic U.S. House candidates won 240,000 more votes, but Republicans still took almost 2/3 of the seats. But at their state house level, it's been horrifically gerrymandered. I mean, Democrats won more votes for the state house in Michigan in 2012, 2014, 2018, 2020, and depending on how you count a special election, even in 2016. And they never once took control of the chamber because that was how seriously gerrymandered those Republican maps were. The man who drew them is named Jeff Timmer, a Republican operative. He has apologized for it and said he just cannot believe the extremism and the crazies that he launched into power.
Wow.
And so that Michigan voters had enough of this that they passed a ballot initiative in 2018 that 61% of voters backed, and they established an independent commission. And this commission just turned in its final maps the other day, and they look like they are terrific nonpartisan maps down the middle that the side that wins the most votes will actually be able to hold power, that there will be competitive seats that matter, and they did a terrific job. So they ought to be applauded. And I think that this ought to stand as an example for everybody who says, there's nothing I can do. We can't do anything about this. It's just not true. There are some terrific examples of real people. I mean, the Michigan process was started by a woman in her 20s named Katie Fahey, who 2 days after the 2016 election goes on Facebook and posts about ending gerrymandering in Michigan and launches a redistricting revolution in the state. And they're going to have fair maps there as a result, something they didn't have for the last decade.
Do you know her?
Turned off Twitter and did the work.
Do you know her?
I do. She's terrific.
She'd be a great person to talk to.
Oh, she's fantastic. She's fantastic. Yeah, I've got a chapter and then rigged on her. Yeah.
So that's amazing. That's an amazing story, but that, I guess it still rests on the conscience of the people, or a lack of corruption of an independent commission. You can form an independent commission, but then it can be influenced in any number of ways, it would seem. And so it almost depends on who the player.
It's all about how you structure and balance it, right? It's all about the criteria you give. It's all about how commissioners wind up there. And when you've got politicians choosing those folks, it doesn't work as well. When you use a more randomized process that they use in Michigan or a process that they use in California, in which you have to apply and go through an application process and be vetted, it's a much different outcome.
Interesting. Everybody should read more about that. But I mean, as soon as you mention this woman's name, it's like, as you describe it and how effective it is, it's like, to me, the obvious thing as an activist or as just a person who wants to, accomplish something somewhere is find someone who's done it and copy what they did. So it's like, contact this woman, see what she's done. And we're doing that locally in our school district, trying to fight, against these folks who are terrified of teaching history and all the whole anti-CRT movement. And so it's like you copy. Go ahead.
I wrote a book called Unrigged that had the terrible timing of being published on March 18th of 2020, just as the nation shut down. So the book kind of got lost and disappeared. But I tell the story of Katie Fahey in there and the victory in Michigan, but also victories like this from all across the country in red states, in purple states, in blue states.
Yeah. And
I really do believe that the stories in that book can be a roadmap for people who are trying to make change. It's folks who ended, felon disenfranchisement in Florida, or who expanded Medicaid in Idaho, or, beat gerrymandering back in Utah, or fought for voting rights in North Dakota. There are examples out there of people who are doing this work and winning.
It's so relevant that everything you researched in that book and the application of these strategies, I think, are really so important. So we should talk about it ASAP. Let me just ask you, though, about these two laws that, first of all, I don't love that, people say Democrats aren't effective or they didn't get anything done, or even about Republicans, when the president and the House of Representatives does pass, the president says, send me that House bill that you just passed out of the House and I'll sign it. And then it gets stuck in the Senate. Like, I want to give them credit for passing these two different voting rights bills that would do a lot to restore the Voting Rights Act, which Dr. King and civil rights leaders fought and died for. But I feel like they don't get that credit. But what would happen if the Senate were to pass these bills? And then if you want to tell me what you think the probability of it would be, would it not be a major game changer?
It would be a major game changer. And I think I'm a little more down on the Democrats over the inability to do something here, just because they said it was going to be their top priority. The bully pulpit of the presidency really has not been used, I think, as effectively on this issue to really organize and marshal public awareness. The president has said that the moment we are in is as dangerous as any since the Civil War. And yet he said that in one speech, and I haven't really heard him say it again since July of 2021. If that's what you think, get out there and fight. And I just think that the danger right now, what we're seeing coming out of Republican state legislatures around the country, is just so clear and compelling. They're plotting in plain sight. And if we can't use the power that we have in this moment, that we still have it, to pass a bill that defends democracy against gathering serious impending storms, we're going to regret it for generations.
I mean, you talk about what he might say differently, and I agree with you. I think there could be all kinds of things done differently. Certainly, as someone who thinks a lot about communication, I think there's a lot that could be done rhetorically. I think people like, AOC on the younger end, or people like Bernie Sanders on the other. Like, I, by the way, love that Bernie Sanders repeats the same shit over and over and over for decades. I think it's awesome. I know that people tend to tune it out, but he tweaks it. I like his style. Anyway, outside of, the bully pulpit and rhetoric, I mean, what is there anything else that could be done? Or, are there organizations and activists that aren't doing something right?
Tough, right? The filibuster makes it really tough. And people get on Biden and they say, oh, Lyndon Johnson would have just banged a bunch of heads. Right. But I mean, Lyndon Johnson had 15 more senators.
Right. And it was different.
When you've got 50, any one of them can gum up the works. And as it is right now, there are two Democrats, both of whom support these bills, but they see preserving these rules of the Senate as more important than buttressing our democracy in this moment. I think that is wrong. I think that the filibuster is anti-majoritarian, that it's been used for, more than a century as a tool to try to, stop civil rights gains. It's been used as a tool of white suppression. And that I don't think that it is going to serve as any protection if Republicans take over, because they've already shown us what they're willing to do when they have power. What are they going to do? Got the Voting Rights Act?
Right. The argument has always been, if we change the rules while we have power, they're going to change the rules when they get power. And I think there's, to some extent, that was a fair argument in different time periods throughout our history, maybe. But at this point, it's, I mean, you don't think it ever was a great argument, you're saying?
I think it might have been at one point, but, certainly the threats that we're facing right now are real and serious and existential.
Yes.
And
yes,
I sound, sometimes I worry I sound like a crazy person talking like this, but that is how serious this is. And if we're not willing to change the filibuster to pass a bill that the future of the republic, I'm not going to say it rests on it, but the future of the republic is under assault, and this bill would help protect it. And it's the only way to get it done, because there's no help coming from the other side. Mitt Romney and Susan Collins aren't willing to come over on this, let alone 8 others.
You've had an impressive career as an editor and as a writer, as a journalist, telling us if we would just do this, or if we just do that, or look at the people who are doing this right, follow them. And you've generally been right. The things you say are going to happen, just happen, because you follow this stuff so closely and you've been so involved in the mix. So, all I can say is I appreciate you joining me to give your take on this. And everybody obviously should be reading your books and following you on Twitter and listening to what you have to say, and your colleagues and the people who, there's a lot of folks who've been saying these kinds of things. So we'll just keep talking and learning. And I think getting involved, people have to get involved at the local level. You can't, for a long time, I talked a lot about it and thought that was enough. But, I now I'm involved. And by the way, it's kind of fun. I've met a lot of cool people. So
we have to defend our democracy with the exact same passion and fervency that Republicans have spent decades using, trying to undermine it. And if that means getting out and running to be the election commissioner or for your local school board, that's what we have to do.
Well said. Well said. And thank you, as always, for your time. I'll let you get back to cookies. I really appreciate you joining me, David Daley, and hopefully we'll talk very soon.
Always a pleasure, Pete. Anytime.
All right. There he goes. David Daley. Definitely go get that book, Unrigged. I need to go back to it and do a whole interview with David about it and then use it as a guide for how we need to save our democracy. Really good book. Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. David Daley, so great talking to him. I always appreciate his time. I'm super impressed with how much he knows about these issues, because he's covered these issues for a really long time. And of course, he's great at talking about them. He's on Twitter at DaveDaley3, if you haven't followed him already. Okay, now it's time to get to my last 2 guests of the year. They've been joining me almost every Friday for weeks now. We had planned a tour together, or we had some dates at least that we were starting to book, but I'm not sure about them. I'll give you a heads up next week if you're planning on going to those dates, January 15th, 16th, and 22nd. But they are comedians Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg. I don't want to give you their whole long intros. They don't care. You should follow them and support them and buy Christian's album and buy all of Ophira's albums. They both have several albums, and Ophira has books, and just so much that you can go and support their work. And thank them, as always, on Twitter for joining us at Ophira E and at Christ Finnegan on Twitter and Instagram. And now here is the great theme song to get us started, written by the very talented listener and supporter of the show, Gareth Sever, who you should also follow. Links to him and all the contributors in every day's show notes. Here we go.
Christian, Ophira, Finnegan, Christian, Finnegan. However you slice them up, you get a different word. If you say it fast enough, you clearly sound absurd. When you say it louder, it sounds like they're real words. Christian, Ophira, Finnegan, Christian, Finnegan. I don't think you're ready for what you haven't heard from Christian, Ophira, and Pete.
This is what I'll say about that song. It's a great intro song because right before I hit record, we were all just commiserating and shitting on life and the world about Omicron and shows. And as soon as I hit play, I'm looking at Christian and Ophira, and we're all kind of start laughing. It's a perfect, turned you around a little bit, at least a little bit.
It is a palate cleanser. That is for certain.
By the way, and you talked about starting with a mantra, and I opened up my notebook to my mantra page.
Go for it.
Heavily influenced by Pete's influence in my life. And I wrote, there's mantras, and then you write your own personal mantras. And I opened up to the page. I don't remember writing this, but it just says, repeat this. It's not my fault. I did nothing wrong.
I love it. I love it. And it's a great way to start as well. So,
I mean, that's a good point, but counterpoint, Ophira, haven't you though?
Yeah.
But not. Yes, I've done plenty of things wrong, but with the best intentions.
So, do we like palate cleansers? I love palate cleansers. What are they?
I love palate cleansers.
Where do they show up? They seem like very self-helpy, though, for me. They seem like very positive, Ophira.
Well, I mean, literal palate cleansers, like ginger when you're eating sushi?
Yeah, or a sorbet in between your fine dining.
Wait, that's what the ginger they give you with sushi is for?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a palate cleanser.
I knew that.
I'm one of those trashy people who just takes my ginger and wasabi and puts it in the soy sauce and just mashes it all around. And so I don't use it for its intended purpose.
I eat those leaves that come
the little
with
plastic green. Yeah.
Not the plastic ones. I would eat those. Eat those. I mean, before kale made it onto the plate, we were the family that looked at it used as like decoration around the Pizza Hut salad bar, and we're like, just take it. It's fine. It's good for you.
It's green.
No, I'm happy to talk literal palate cleansers, but I'm thinking of on social media. I saw this morning someone tweet about a horrible crime that occurred. I generally try not to tweet or share those kinds of things because they're just like, I think of people looking through Twitter and then seeing that and just having their moment or hour or day ruined the way it did me. And then that's when I like a palate cleanser of a cute child or animal or a cat snuggling with a dog. I do like those on social media. Are there other examples of palate cleansers in life that are not like literal? But
that's what going for a walk is supposed to be, right?
Yeah. When like walking by a restaurant, like and smelling like barbecue all of a sudden, or just some awesome food smell is like a good reboot for your brain.
Right. Eating a weed gummy, I think, is a palate cleanser.
I think these. I think you're wrong. I think those are two things that are like really great therapies. Like going for a walk is a thing that you do and it makes you feel. And the weed gummy, the same thing, gives you hours. I feel like a palate cleanser has to be something short and quick that you weren't almost.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like when you're walking down the street and you walk by like a pizza place and you smell pizza and you're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I do love the smell of pizza, that like when you can just tell it's like just on the point of burning. You're like, that's mine. I feel that same way about coffee. I used to go next door to the bagel place here and ask them, just when I was sad, I would ask them what bagel is the hottest, and they would just give me one steaming hot fresh bagel, and I would. Oh,
you don't mean like hottest, like the most popular.
No.
Which bagel's the hottest? Like everybody's
actually the hottest. Yeah, actually, and those they messed with me a little bit because I walked in. I was like, "Which one is the hottest?" And the guy goes, "Everything." And I was like, "Really, everything?" Like, thanks a lot, dude. And then I said, "So I'll have a sesame." And he goes, why wouldn't you take the everything?
Oh, he meant everything bagel. I see.
Yeah, and I thought he was being a New York jerk.
You thought he was being a jerk.
Well, speaking of New York jerks,
you are in the shed for it.
Sorry. Speaking of the jerk shed, all that means is that the guy in it is a jerk. I don't know what you're trying to read into it. Is we're all kind of in a pretty, I'm really trying hard to crowbar this pivot.
You're
not
nice.
to be jerks right now, because this is not supposed to happen. Christmas and New Year's and Taint Week and all of this time was supposed to be, we're pretty liberated back to normal-ish behavior, live performance. We're all performers. And, now we're sitting here doing nothing. And
to me, this feels markedly worse than 2 years ago. Like, it's not worse in terms of the actual public health crisis. Like, it's far better. It's, and I think it will be, I think at least in New York City, it's going to be fine. But in terms of my spirits and the what it's doing to our industry, it's much worse, because there's no help coming, and there's nobody who. There's a lot of people out there who kind of are being rhapsodically fatalistic as sort of a personal branding choice, and I feel like it's a real fucking bummer. I've had to follow a few people who are just okay, we just these professional scolds, and it's just.
Wait a second, give me an example of what you're talking about.
One woman who who's just been a real Chicken Little, and listen, these are real. I'm not acting like these aren't real problems, and that this isn't. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
We could all be a little alarmist, and it's fine, but just constantly scolding people, like, if you're thinking of going out on New Year's Eve. I say this with love. Let me be the voice of reason and tell you to stay home, and just constantly stay home, stay home, stay home. It's like, all right, pay our fucking rent. Pay our rent, please.
Totally.
There's all this pressure on people to stay home, with no mention of people whose lives depend on people not staying home. And
things like New Year's Eve and things like the week between Christmas and New Year's Eve.
The busy time.
The busy time. This is where people make half their year.
Yeah.
And
obviously I have a very skewed perspective, given, my wife being a venue owner and me being a live performer and all that. And I'm not saying that they're wrong, but sometimes I feel like, do you really think that your constant tweeting about this is having any public health effect, or is this just a performance on your part to show the world what kind of person you are? And it's making me very angry all the time.
While you're inviting people over and doing your own thing. So I was just in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, as you know from last week. And because they have, not even close to, whatever, 16th of the population of New York, and a very vaccinated crowd. And they just shut everything down. It was like, so then I was like, oh, New York must be shut down. No.
Well, they can't shut down, because if they shut things down, then they have to help you. They'd rather just kind of it's like limp. Not return your calls, essentially, so that you have to figure shit out on your own. And then if you go under, then it's, hey, that's the marketplace. You got you couldn't make it work. But if they actually make you shut down like they did in 2020, well, then they have to give you rent relief, and they have to give you more grants and shit like that, and they're not going to do that again.
That's what I think you mean. That's what's so depressing. I'm still trying to unpack whether or not how I feel, if I agree, disagree, that this time it's worse. This year it's worse than it was. And I think you made a strong case for it because of the point that no help is coming. At least the first time. First of all, there was a lot of uncertainty, and that's usually bad. But you knew that there was going to be help. People were more on board, and of course it was more dangerous. It was a different story, so you were even more scared for your health. But now it's basically, you got to work, you got to stay open, and you're going to have to pay your bills, and you're not going to be getting any revenue. You're not going to be making any money, and that's worse. That's markedly
and so much of it is purely psychological. It's not even like the first time where there was this sort of unity of like, hey, we're all in this foxhole together. Let's just batten down and get through it. Now it's, no, you're on your own.
Yeah.
You're, And it's I don't know. It's hard to feel sunny about it right now. That's for sure.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah, the only thing that it's not going to happen here, but in BC, they made this huge announcement. I don't know why this was like their number one thing, but they were like, all gyms and fitness centers will be closed till January 30th. And I thought like everyone just looked at that and went, "Oh, don't have to do that New Year's resolution."
Yeah.
They were just like, take it out of my hands. Take it out of my hands.
But that's a funny joke to illustrate exactly what Christian is saying, which is like, for me, at least now I don't have to do that thing that I didn't want to do. And for so many people, that certainly is the case. But gyms make most of their money in membership sales during that month. And you mentioned Ophira, restaurants, obviously, and we're all talking about live performance. I mean, there are certain times a year that this is the worst time for, but it's also interesting to try to understand why Canada might be different and why each state, I suppose, might be different. But then it brings us back, I think, sometimes to just a general feeling of concern for each other to some extent. But at the same time, if you're vaccinated and you're boosted, you're not going to die if you wear a mask. Like, but then it doesn't mean anybody's going to want to go out and do stuff.
That's what I'm saying when I say that it's more psychological at this point.
Yeah.
And that's why I get very annoyed at some of the doomsday people, because it's like, this must feel really good to you to sort of perform how noble you are and whatnot. But the compounding depression that is being created around live performance by people just, not because they actually think that they're making any change, but just that they're proving how fucking noble they are. It really is hard. It's hard.
And the other thing I think people miss out, because there's no nuance left in life, is there is a huge space between dying from a disease and being sick enough, I'll be very specific, that you can't go to school and teach the kids today. And so the schools are going to close because the teachers can't teach. They can't go to school. It's not like we're worried about people dying as much, maybe, but you can't do the job that, and same thing with Broadway. Like, the performers are sick. They can't perform. It's not that they're going to die. They just need a few days.
Yeah, that's why all these flights got canceled. It wasn't that, like, somehow COVID.
That's right.
It's just that they couldn't literally staff the fucking flight attendants.
That was my flight. My flight. And at least they were transparent about it. I mean, I think they wanted to be transparent about it, because you hear that and you go, oh, rather than whatever other reason it could be, which would probably make you mad. It's just like, no, we actually don't have enough staff.
You told me that they canceled the flight, but then you got on the phone with them and said, if I serve as a flight attendant, will that? And they said, are you willing to do that? And you stepped up.
Yeah, well, there was, I mean, honestly, the amount of times that I did my job and people said, I can't believe, 20 years veteran, I wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
But they did make you do the 1960s sexy flight attendant thing, though. They made you wear the really demeaning outfit.
Yeah, that's
the only outfit they had available was a size 4, which is 2 sizes too small.
The question,
and I just went with it.
The question is, but the question is only, do you want to get home? It's not about your integrity or dignity. Do you want to get home? Wear this.
Do you remember integrity? Remember dignity?
So I flew, by the way, I did fly a, discount-ish airline home from Canada. And right now, in my other experiences flying recently, you walk on the luxury of flying. Oh, the luxury. And they give you a little packet that within it has a Purell wipe. And that's the end of the service for the flight. But on this one, the woman stood there with an off-brand cylinder of Clorox wipe. I think it was called Fabulos. And just peeled one sheet out of it at a time and whipped it into your hand as you walked in.
All right.
That's what you get for flying Dollar General Airlines.
I love with propellers across the nation. I love the idea that someone in a conference room or in an email said, this is how we're going to, you save a penny, you save hundreds or thousands of dollars. And someone came up with that brilliant idea to just make everything smaller and give you less and less and less. But I think the airline issue is a perfect example of this. The bottom line is people don't feel well enough to go to work, and everybody's going to get sick. And the next, I've heard 2 to 8 weeks is going to be, I heard Michael Osterholm say, a viral blizzard, which is a great band Christian.
Oh my God. Can we combine more terrifying words?
Shit storm.
Viral Blizzard kicked ass at my high school battle of the bands.
I bet.
I will say.
I bet.
Exactly.
They were very intense.
They're a jazz quartet.
What'd you say? Sorry.
I said it was not worth repeating. Weird they were a jazz quartet.
Talk over him twice.
I know. I did it twice. I'm sorry. Say it one more time, Pete.
It was a jazz quartet.
Anyway, I was
Nope.
just being an asshole. I was going to talk over you a third time. Sorry. Jazz quartet. That's funny, and it should have been funny the first time if I hadn't ruined it. I'm sorry.
I'm leaving.
Your own show.
You stand up without Pete Dominic.
I mean, it's easy to leave now.
So
to be honest,
I know we're all in kind of a leaving mode right now.
Well, let's talk about what has been canceled. You know, a lot of obviously high profile events have, and then maybe talk about what hasn't been canceled, what that says. And I just have a short list just off the top of my head. But sure. a bunch of bowl games have been canceled. Joe Rogan's gig in Vancouver got canceled, but that was only because he said he wasn't vaccinated on his show, which is hilarious, I think. You've got a whole bunch of schools that are going to be going remote, and then we can talk about all of the gigs. But New York City's New Year's Eve, I guess it's pared down. I haven't followed up, but Las Vegas is they're doing nothing different. 300,000 people apparently for the Vegas New Year's. So it's New Year's Eve. It's tonight, I guess. At
this point, it's like I don't even know. I mean, it's outdoors. I don't know how the quote unquote responsible areas of this country aren't going to get fucked by their own responsibility in this. Like, that the local economies are going to get fucked because people are being responsible. Yeah. I don't know.
So wait a second, ball drop. That's all. Last time I checked, it was happening in Times Square.
Oh, I think the ball will drop. I'm just not sure if anybody will be there to see it.
Oh, the ball always drops, doesn't it?
Not for me. It didn't. Not until I was 17.
The viral ball.
That explains your high pitched voice.
Got it. The jazz quartet reference. That's terrible. I dated a lot of jazz musicians. I take that back.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't have the mental capacity to riff right now. I'm sorry. At least I thought I did.
We're here for you.
I'm not really a yes-ander today. I'm more of a no, however.
That's very improv 2022.
Yes.
No, however.
I was going to tell a story.
I like a but maybe.
But maybe. So I mean,
yes, sure.
The bottom line is we're demonstrating with our moods and with our energy about this how everybody is probably feeling. I'm sure everybody is feeling it's different this time than it was in the past 2 years that we had Christmases with COVID. Right? This is the third Christmas with COVID.
Second.
Really?
20 to 21, and then 20.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah. The one before that was just crappy.
Yeah.
And New Year's, as well. And then now January. I mean, you might as well just throw January in there, right? According to the forecast.
Yep.
Well, and that's what's so crazy is that it's entirely possible, likely even, based on anecdotal evidence that seems to be coming out, that things are going to be substantially better in New York towards the end of the month. I mean, that we're going to, but I think the psychology of things being so bad in other places is going to keep things shitty in New York as well.
Right.
That's right.
And because, and again, I don't blame them. Everybody's trying to exercise control over a situation that we have no control over. And so you find little silly ways to sort of pretend like you're in charge of things. But, there are a lot of people in New York who think my wearing 8 masks over my face here is going to stop someone in Florida from getting sick, and so my fear is that things are going to be not all better, but trending in a good direction here, but it won't matter because everybody's going to be seeing the news and seeing how bad things are in other places, and therefore no one's going to be going out. And yeah.
What do you both think about, if you want to say, if you're going to get it? Like, I'm pretty resigned that even with my booster, I'm going to get a case. Hopefully it'll be mild, as I've heard, with others. But, in my situation, it's mainly because I have 2 kids. teenagers who are continuing to mostly socialize in the way that they normally would, and then they're going to go to school. So I just, even though I live in the jerk shed for the most part, I still feel like I feel like we're probably all going to get it. Do you feel that way given your situation, your lifestyle, or is it, do you still think, well, I have a chance of escaping this?
Well, I've had it. I'm vaccinated. I'm boosted. My husband's vaccinated and boosted. My son is vaccinated. I guess
what else can you do?
What else am I going to do? I always wear a mask. I don't know what's going to happen. Am I putting in avails for New York comedy clubs in January? I'm really divided right now. I don't know what to do. I need the money and I don't want to. It's just like, well, if they're all open, I don't know. I actually texted a friend today who I feel has a good brain on her shoulders and sort of has what I would call a minor in medicine. It's like her hobby. So that's scary. Yeah. But anyways, I was just like, what is your take on this? Because I can't decide. I can't decide what to do. Do I think I'm going to get it? I mean, it seems inevitable.
I just got literally 2 minutes before we jumped on the air. I got my PCR test results from yesterday. And as of today, I still do not have it. But
as of yesterday, I had a test and I don't have it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, is that just going to be a thing? Is that once a week we just get tested? I guess it seems like a lot of time and energy to live a day-to-day life. But if that's what it is, that's what it is. I like Ophira, it's like, I don't even have a child. So Cambry and I are both, triple vaxxed, and we're being as responsible as we can while still running a business for the 2 weeks or whatever until that gets shut down. But I read a study yesterday, and when I say I read a study, I read an article summarizing a study. There may
and by
be
that, I mean, Cambry was reading it and just giving you the summary,
which is
out loud.
What I really mean is I saw a headline.
What you really mean is you saw a tweet referencing a study, an article about a study from a questionable...
I did actually read the article, skimmed it. I did not read the whole thing, but that there may be some preliminary indication that getting Omicron acts as almost protection against Delta.
Right. Yes, I heard that's
really
huge.
What? That is the optimism we need going into 2022.
Yeah.
It's basically the old, take a, what is it? Something spoonful of something.
Well,
spoonful of sugar makes the medicine,
go down. No, it's a different one.
I think you're talking about like the smoke a pack. It almost operates like a vaccine in the sense that, it gets you a little sick, which the Omicron obviously, but then it keeps you from getting super sick. I'm not saying people should be getting Omicron, but I'm saying that there is maybe a silver lining to if you do end up getting it, perhaps.
I think, though, I don't trust the lobbyists behind Big Omicron who are pushing. This could be...
I was just going to say, it sounds so bizarre.
In the interest of the Omicron, folks.
Nation. Don't Look Up. Did you see that movie, Don't Look Up?
Yes, twice.
I have not watched it.
I watched it twice, and
so good.
I was gonna watch it, but then I found out it was written by a guy who I hate so much I muted his name on Twitter, and so now I have to read that guy David Sirota, who's like Bernie's comms dude. He and Neera Tanden used to go at each other on Twitter so constantly, and in such an annoying, unlikable way that I muted both of their names on the same day.
Yeah, I don't know what I think about him. Per se, but I did like that movie a lot. I enjoyed it.
I've heard really diverging opinions on it, which is kind of nice. You very rarely hear some people saying I love something and other people saying I absolutely fucking hate something. That's better than.
What are you talking about? Have you lived in America at all?
Well, I just mean,
you mean entertainment?
People that ostensibly are in kind of your Twitter feed, like you think of them as having a certain attitude, But I've seen equal amounts of people love it and equal amounts of people hate it in my social media feed.
Yeah. Well, it basically, if that movie was talking about Omicron, it would be like Big Omicron is trying to tell us, the brand of Omicron is trying to tell us to expose ourselves.
I think it's actually even more specific in that I'll never, ever forget, and he said it more than a few times, Trump saying when the virus first spread all over he said several times, it maybe it'll just go away. That is, don't look up.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, maybe
there's a woman named Michelle Wooker who when I used to work in publishing before I started doing comedy, I worked at a lit agency, and I would have to go through the slush pile of all the unsolicited manuscripts and whatnot. And a friend of mine knew this woman who had written a book about the Dominican Republic, about Hispaniola, very weirdly, about the cultural clash between Dominicans and Haitians. And it was actually incredibly interesting. And I ended up giving it to my boss, and he got her book published, whatever. So I feel tiny point of pride about this. But she's gone on to write a book called The Gray Rhino, which is kind of like a device like Elephant in the Room or something like that. And I haven't read the book, but I've read a lot about her. And basically, a gray rhino is like a problem that is so massive and it's charging right at you, but you're so scared that you just don't address it because it's just you can't deal with it. And of course, obviously, climate change being the granddaddy of those.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, we don't even have a chance to focus on climate change. That's how I feel. Yeah. It's like we don't even have a chance. Because every time someone's like, yes, we need to put all of our funding and resource towards this, basically we're like, but we don't know if our kids are going to school.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that I hate talking about this because I have a hard time not thinking this way, but COVID, the pandemic, at least in America for sure, certainly is exactly what we can't come together with the simplest solution. Big problem, but not that. Like, here's a simple solution. Just get a jab. Just get a shot. And that's how we come together on this. Climate change is a massive problem that requires both like consumption and energy and all kinds of different solutions.
Here's a thought experiment for you. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, I was done.
Here's a thought experiment for you. Or I don't know if thought experiment's the right term. What if Biden had gone to Trump after the insurrection, and after Biden was sworn in, and said, I will give you immunity from all prosecution, and I will block any congressional look into any of your any legal, problems you have if you go on a national tour with me promoting vaccinations. Would you have taken that deal? Like, would that be a good, would you have taken that?
That's very interesting. But, recently at a rally, he mentioned that he was boosted.
But in the typical sort of Trump, he said it and then kind of poo-pooed it, but it's your choice. But yeah, it was that Bill O'Reilly half-filled amphitheater.
Well,
yes. So, but don't you just think, so this is my fear. I love where you're going. And I think it's interesting to peg it to one person. But don't you think the mini Trump minions that are being grown right now in the lab would open their big blinky laser eyes and just take the place of
I think you're right. I think that's why it wouldn't work, because we're actually seeing the hypothetical you just laid out. I don't know if you've seen the latest news, but first of all, Trump went on with Candace Owens and he gave a full-throated, that was after the Bill O'Reilly live event, full-throated defense of the vaccine, get vaccinated. And then the political analysis became he knows that he needs to do this on the vaccine to win back the suburbs for him to run again. It's a political analysis. And because he's taken this political analysis, guess what? The hypothetical that you're saying, Ophira, seems to have played out yesterday when crazy Alex Jones said, the fact that Trump is supporting the demon vaccine, I'm going to tell all the secrets now. He's going to come out and rip him apart, and he should, because it'll be great for Alex Jones. It'd be right on brand for him, not on brand for Trump. That's I feel like the analysis right now. If Trump had done what you're saying, what would have happened is what Ophira is saying. All his supporters that need the anti-vax stuff for their clicks would have turned on him. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Not all. Some, not all. I bet he could have peeled off half of them. I think that there's half people out there who oppose the vaccine because they felt like that was their way of signaling loyalty to the Trump movement. I think that, that it became part and parcel with sort of being, if you're a Trump flag guy, then you had to be anti-vaccine, that was part of being on that team. I think that if Trump and Biden had gone on like a 10-city tour or something like that, and both got out on stage and said, take the vaccine, it would have given cover to a lot of people who would never want to come out to their community as like being against Trump to have. I think you wouldn't have. Yeah, you're never going to get the Candace Owens or and it would have completely trashed Trump's political future. So that's why he never would do it. But
right.
I don't know the answer to that myself, but I've been rolling that around in my head.
I think I just gave you the answer, and then sounds like you pushed back.
But I'm saying he wouldn't. He would be able to at least 1/3 of those people who won't get vaccinated would have gotten vaccinated. I think if Trump in a not just mentioned it once or twice, but actually went on like a pro-vaccine tour. I think it would.
What if it backfired? What if it backfired and people like me were like, Trump's telling me to get vaccinated, I'm not going to do it?
Well, a lot of people were doing that before Biden got elected. I remember Joy Reid saying, like, how are you ever going to trust this CDC, like any vaccine they come out with?
God.
So.
The CDC tweets, I know it's all just shitting on the CDC, but
it's so
they did make me laugh. I was just like, we've lost our minds. Yeah. I mean, I think it was like someone said the CDC recommends like to let it rain on your head or something like that.
Yeah, everybody is just, I feel this is I can't laugh at any of those tweets because covering this stuff for so long, I know the institutions that have the highest reputation in public approval ratings, and it's like, whatever might be the Supreme Court has lost so much. The military has lost so much. Academia, but the post office held pretty strong, and the CDC was was not so controversial until COVID. And this is a legitimate complaint and criticism. I just hate the cynicism of like this sucks, but it's not like it's easy for them to what they're doing. And but
it's not like they're making a decision like let's just suck for the sake of sucking. It's like they're trying to get their hands around the situation and not doing a terribly.
But the
great
idea
job
that it would make anybody not trust a future decision that the CDC would make or the FDA would make about a recall of a bag of lettuce or something that's bad. There are smart, amazing, the best of the best work in those agencies doing that. They're not perfect, and when they're not perfect, we stop trusting them, and that's bad in my opinion.
Because something fills that vacuum, and
right.
We're not.
Let me tell you
more than CDC,
and it's called Joe Rogan.
That's right. I read the thing that if you are asymptomatic and tested positive and continue to be asymptomatic, you just have to quarantine for 5 days. And I was like, great. This is what I'm writing that down, and now I understand. Thank you.
Well, and the thing is, but again, though, even in their execution of that announcement was just really poorly done because what they, and granted, maybe they did do this and just, media figures, pundits are being willfully obtuse. But, I feel like if it had been made clear, hey, there is some indication based on Omicron that it is not necessary if you've been vaxxed, if you had a breakthrough infection, that you don't need to quarantine as long. And that is why we were reducing it to 5 days. But it just kind of was like, hey, from now on, it's only 5 days. And then, of course, you hear about all these things about CEOs wanting it to move it to 5 days. And so, again, many.
It's really funny when
just communications issues.
Because every day, I do this news segment here on the show, except for Fridays when we're talking, because I hang out with people Thursday night. But I'm always grabbing the clips of certainly Fauci and many others, but he's always in a tough position. I do feel bad for him. I can criticize him. I think everybody should. But I do feel bad when he clearly behind the scenes is pissed that somebody made a mistake. But, in front of a camera, he always says something like, when he knows that it's wrong and that he's probably really mad or other people are mad at him, there's a disagreement. He always says the same thing. He's like, we could have done this better. Like the best you ever get is we could have done better with the tests. We could have done it better. You're like, behind the scenes, he's like, what the fuck?
That's pretty good. So Brooklyn.
I mean, I hate the idea of somebody being kind of run out of town simply for doing their job and doing the best they could or whatever. But it's kind of like when a team has lost 10 in a row, sometimes you just got to fire the coach just to put a new face on it. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, I don't think people have a huge problem if Fauci decided to maybe retire. And not that he needs to. I think he's done the best he could and in a really untenable political environment. but you know,
if he does retire,
be the worst thing in the world.
I think they should replace him with an older white guy.
Yeah, it's
like Colonel Sanders looking, like a really, really trustworthy old white guy, like a pink-faced.
The problem is that they're all employed. So where do you find one?
Good point.
Where do you find one that wants to make either lower move,
or they're just comfortably retired. That was mean to all the white older bald men who are struggling. Before we wrap, I do want to ask you this one specific question about what I should have asked it earlier, but like, how do we feel as performers? Christian, you can look at it from, you know, venue ownership as well, but like, there's different, like, we've got these 3 gigs that we were promoting, and now we're like, should we be promoting? And of course, you guys have a lot of other gigs and so on. Like, how do we feel about performing ourselves, bringing people out? You know,
well, let me, Pete, bring up an amazing comedy special called Show Your Work, which is currently available. No, but you know, this exact topic was one of the things I addressed in my fucking special, which is, you know, the quote that I have in the special, which is that depression is the inability to construct a future. And that is what is so hard right now. It would almost be better if they were like, comedy's done, find something else to do with your life.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But it's so hard to make any plans
to do with your life.
Yes.
Laughing is over.
Please.
Yes.
And
I mean, honestly, I would just like us. It would be great. I feel so divided with this, but the things are open and people are people going out? I mean, I'm not going to go undercover to comedy clubs to see if there's people there. But
there are.
So, yeah.
But by
a
the
lot
way,
of them are tourists. But
well, that's a really, really great answer. Do you have an answer for that as well, Ophira? Like how you're feeling, how you're looking at performing, looking forward to it, feeling indifferent, feeling even guilty. I mean, by the way, no answer is the wrong answer at this point in the pandemic, I think.
I mean, it's also like, what do you do on stage? So let's say tomorrow I'm like, yeah, I'll just go out on stage and perform. No problem. Live stage, people there, whatever. And then I get on there and I'm like, me and my husband, like, also I would just feel weird about the material.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like we were at a party last week. Were you? How incredibly irresponsible.
Went to a restaurant. We went out to eat.
Yeah. So like, what are we even talking about on stage? Like, hey, everybody, this could be our last show. Enjoy. You better laugh.
That is
for like the third time now. For like the third time we're doing this.
Exactly. We're the final.
Yeah. Then we had that during Delta, and now we're doing it again.
Well,
I mean, you know, Broadway went through their understudies. You know,
I heard that.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity for some kid from Cleveland.
Well, dude, you should see the NBA right now, because the NBA are signing all of these. There's the Knicks played the Pistons last night. The Pistons had 10 of their 15 players out on COVID protocols. So they had hired a bunch of people from their G League, the developmental league, and then also just a bunch of random just dudes who were playing in, like, you know, Latvia last week.
Oh my God.
And so the announcers don't know their names. You know, it's absurd. But the NBA can't afford to shut down again.
That's the Knicks.
It's not going to be.
Did you hear what happened at the Milwaukee Bucks game?
No.
They didn't have enough guys to play, and they just pulled a really fat old white guy out, and they gave him a jersey, and he played. He lived his dream for a quarter.
I think going forward, when they like go to hire players, it's not going to be about, you know, their athleticism or, you know, how great how what their shooting average is. I don't know any of these things. They're just going to look at antibodies. They're going to be like, what kind of antibodies do they have?
Yeah.
Just look at their antibodies.
What are the antibody standings this week? Who's got the highest?
Well, Ophira, last week, we can wrap it up, but last week, I think it was last week, Christian, I thought about this a lot. Like, Christian's like, you know what? If I could just get paid to make mixtapes, I would. And I thought about for a little while about like, how can that happen? Yes. But and then I literally was like, how much would it be worth to Christian to like, he cares about it. So he gave me one for my birthday, which was awesome, but I don't think he did it in 5 minutes. I think he puts a lot of thought into it. Sounds like a lot of work. So like $10.
I do. And I'm in competition with a free algorithm. So
that's true. Yeah.
That free algorithm never works for me. It's always wrong.
Well, but at the same time, I told you the kind of genres, artists, and sounds I like, and you put it like, I don't know if there's an algorithm that could do what you did, but I don't know what I'm talking about. But Ophira, you're now on the spot. It's not comedy. It's not actually anything maybe you've done. What is it, if you could get paid to do it, you think you'd be pretty cool with, pretty happy with? Like, will you?
Podcasting.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
This?
Good luck.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, unfortunately, I feel, oh God, my skills are lame. They're talking to people. Those are my skills, Pete. Talking to people.
Yeah, you're seeing us at our best right now, Pete.
Yeah. You're very good at it. You're very good at it. People love when you do it. So I think, and that's what I was forced with too. When after Sirius ended, I asked myself this question, and I kept coming up with an answer that I don't necessarily need to talk anymore, or be near a microphone or a camera if I could get paid to do something like in nature. Like I thought about going to be a park ranger, but I was like, that's
okay. Brand new skill. Okay. Brand new skill.
Yeah. But I couldn't, it wasn't a realistic thing. So.
Okay. I've thought about this. I would become even though it's basically becoming a farmer, I would go into wine. Oh. I would buy something small if I could afford it, because supposedly all of Northern Oregon is being bought up by the French vineyards because of global warming. And so that land is going for like gazillions of dollars, and winemakers who have been there for generations and generations are just selling it because it's more money they could ever imagine. So I'd have to find like the least
upstate New York
profitable. Yeah, something like that. And I would, that's it.
I like
a winery. Yep.
Do you love wine?
I do. I'm not really even have a very advanced palate. I just like the thing of it.
Yeah, well, I would do that too. I would also do that. Farming is like, me, I'm crazy with my gardens. I would do that for sure. Love it.
Okay. Good to know.
All right. Well, we're going to open a farm.
Do you think I can make 6 figures being a dog walker?
Yes, with the right person.
I think you have to walk like thousands of dogs to make a certain, like, use a lot of dogs at once. I think the more money you make.
Just 2 of the right dogs.
What about just a guy who all I did was just throw the toy for the dog over and over again? Like, because I can do that longer than most people. I think
there's a lot of people that'll do that for free for sure. But there's people that really like
immigrants.
Immigrants
taking our jobs.
Immigrants do love throwing things for dogs more than citizens. At least here, I think.
I'm not part of this. I'm a citizen now, and I'm just going to say, as a former immigrant, this does not relate to me.
You don't agree with any of this. You've never even thrown a thing for an animal. And you wouldn't.
I've never thrown a thing for an animal. All the dogs I've ever had were anti-fetch.
Well, you are Canadian, so.
That's right.
All right, guys. This was really enlightening. And
sorry, this is not really the way we wanted to do a last episode of the year. Like we should have had like a positive 2022.
We're going to do another one tomorrow.
Yeah. Resolutions. We shat on them. I forgot to bring that up. Quick take.
Yeah, I think the wrong time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought this up right as we're about to get off the air. I resolved to find something. Like, my wife has watercoloring. My wife has gotten into watercoloring.
Oh, yeah.
And she also is into ice skating. She's taking ice skating lessons. I want to find one thing like that. I want to find one thing that's just a hobby, that's just for me and isn't a career thing.
Okay.
That's my goal.
All right.
That's a great one. That is a great one. Oh I might have to adopt yours.
I want to spend an hour throwing ideas at Christian. Just having him just react to them.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about them? And do you have any resolutions before we say goodbye? Ophira.
I usually make a bazillion of them. I usually make like 20 to 40 of them. But right now, I think the one that I have going, which is very like ethereal, I think, is to stop pushing so hard. I just push hard on everything, and I don't think it's the way to go.
So quit.
Kinda. How about surrender?
No, I think that's thoughtful. That's really thoughtful. I think I don't really know how it works, but that's the idea. You'll experiment with it. We'll help you.
Exactly.
We'll help you.
How about you, Pete?
I do my birthday. I have a big thing on my birthday every year where I kind of like write about the last year and write about the next year. And I'm working on those for the last 3 months. And, and it's.
I hope your resolution isn't to grow hair.
That's really not fair, Christian. Okay.
Not.
Let's end on silence.
That's
Okay, let's end on silence.
It's all right. I'll let that sit out there. He's very bald.
I feel like at this point, by the way, like I am so glad to be bald because like the rest of the hair on my face, like I'm having to deal with like the ears now and the eyebrows. Like I hate hair. It's so burdensome to me, even in my eyebrows. So I'm so resigned to it all. I'm like, it's just the only problem now is it's cold.
Yeah, whatever you need to tell yourself, man. That's fine.
Just run your fingers through your hair, Christian. Run your fingers through your hair.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, I'm aroused. I'm aroused. This is like better than any porn. Thank you guys very much. Happy New Year.
You're
Love
the
you
best.
both.
Happy New
Looking
Year,
forward to
buddy.
next
Happy New Year.
Bye, Ophira.
Yeah, ended on the big laugh. Like to end on a big laugh. Doesn't always happen in a conversation. Hard to make it work, but not with those two. Ophira Eisenberg, Christian Finnegan. What a great year I've had talking with both of them individually and now together. As of when I'm talking right now, the shows are still on January 15th and 16th. I have a strong feeling they're going to be off, but we will know in the next couple of days. I'll probably know on Monday and let you know as well about the 22nd. There's 3 shows that we're planning. We'll probably postpone them and reschedule them for a little bit later in the year. All right, that's all I've got time for on today's show. Thank you very much for joining me this week and this year and the last 2 years. Very excited about what's to come in the next year for the show, for the community, and continuing to watch it grow. Can't do it without you. Thank you so much for your support. I love you guys so much. This is, in fact, the last show of 2020, maybe the last year, last show of 2021. And so I'm not going to make a big deal of it. I'm just going to stop talking and let John Carroll sing us out as he has all of this year. And before I don't know when John started singing this song or gave it to us. I should find out. But we're always in his debt. Thank you, John. Thank you, Pete Coe. Thank you, everybody, for contributing. Thank you, fake producer Keith. Thank you, dead fake producer Schmeat. And I'm very much looking forward to talking to all of you in the new year.
They'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and